Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. I am so happy to be here on this Monday to talk Nashville soccer with you after a two-match week. And I would say a pretty successful two-match week as well under the belt for Nashville SC. I, of course, am here with Clay Trainum, Valer Shabilla, as always. Y'all, how are you doing? It was a pretty exhausting week for sure when it comes to Nashville soccer, but it does seem like it was a pretty productive week, nonetheless.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of soccer this week. A whole lot of soccer this week. Nashville, obviously, two games. But if you watch the Champions League or any of the European competitions,
Champions
cup
League, who cares?
competitions, what's that?
No one cares about the Champions League, famously.
Fair enough. And the other, I mean, if I supported, Everton or Sheffield United or whatever, I wouldn't either. Moving on. Um, Cup competitions, obviously in Europe, and the league competitions in Europe. So there's a whole lot of soccer all around. Whatever your fix is, I think this week was part of that. I watched a good bit of soccer. I was traveling actually um, for another work to St. Louis, so I didn't get to be at George Park on Wednesday for that Chicago game, but I was there Saturday for the Cincinnati game. And in terms of my weekend, well, got to watch that and got to watch a hectic Arsenal match. That was I don't even know. It had me on edge for 80% of that match, probably, if not more. And yeah, I don't think I got to do much else other than that. Got a steak last night. That was fun with my girlfriend. So
Big time.
there you go. That's the only fun part I'll share.
Did you go to Logan's?
No, I can't be telling you where I went. It'll be. We don't do free shout outs here unless we really feel like it. And I don't feel like it for this place. I mean, it's pretty good. I just don't feel like giving them a shout out. And it
Um,
was not Logan's for what it's worth.
it was obviously Chili's. Now,
Not Chili's either.
Chili's famously popular on pharmaceutical soccer.
Oh,
Uh, my weekend was started with volleyball, so lots of volleyball fun, and then I watched Everton not lose, which is almost like watching them win. And
Proud of you. Proud of you.
I went to a 7-minute wedding, which was incredible.
Oh my God.
Like
I love that.
unbelievable. Actually, best part, this has nothing to do with soccer, but I just want to say it because it's hilarious. So we're at this wedding and everyone is like, dressed up for it. It's outside, it's on Old Hickory Lake. And as the wedding is going on, given very quick wedding, a pontoon boat of a bunch of people in Tennessee Volunteers gears like goes by in the background while the ceremony is going on, and they're all just waving. Like everybody in suits and gear, and just the shot is just a bunch of Vols fans waving on the lake. But you know, watched an SC. It was great. And Everton got bought this morning by the Friedkin Group, which means that 400 million of their debt will be going away for some Houston businessmen in theory. We'll see if it actually happens this time, but that's amazing news and everyone should be excited about it.
what what's the rate of Everton players who will be bought from Roma going forward?
Valer, why do you ask the question? Because now it's going to be just, it's fine.
Roma's not worth more than Everton because Roma's not in the Premier League. He'll sell Roma before he sells Everton.
No, I'm saying how many players they're buying from Roma because
Oh, I thought you
Everton's
meant the other way around. Uh,
no.
I don't know. I mean, who would
Is
you buy?
Francesco Totti going to be coaching Everton? Is my question here.
I we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with them. But most importantly, I shouldn't have to worry about needing to sell players like maybe Mikel Arteta to keep the lights on, like Everton once did many moons ago.
What I would love is for like the new Goodison Park to have like Italian cuisine. Like I just think that would be amazing. Anyway, we can keep going, Steven. We're over. We're done
Now
with
that
this
we've lost
conversation.
all of our listeners talking about Everton, we can now talk.
If you're gonna turn off in episode 285 or whatever this is because we mentioned Everton for 30 seconds, you clearly haven't been listening to this podcast at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're here right now, you're staying at this
This
point.
is
That's
how, Clay, let me tell you, this is how
I want to say
Amplify.
this. I want to say this. One of the most successful podcasts in America frequently talks about Everton. It's worth noting. We may not
you're
have
talking about us,
Blazers
right?
on this show, but
Oh,
so maybe it's just a good thing to keep in mind.
I had a good weekend too. Thank you all for asking. It's very nice of you to care about what I do over the weekends and time. When I ask you every single week, but
You pass some bills. You say what's up to Joe. How's DC?
yes, I passed some bills and I said, "What's up to Joe?" That's absolutely what I did. No, I luckily root for a football team that can actually play football, so that's been kind of fun to actually have. And Chelsea's been playing pretty well as well so far this season.
4-0 Hoosiers.
Yeah, no, Michigan won, Vikings won, Chelsea won, so that was fun this weekend. But I also did get to watch Nashville against Cincinnati, as well as Nashville versus Chicago. So that was a lot of fun to be able to do, have both matches there. Y'all, we got 7 points from 9 this past 3 matches, which is incredible for this team specifically. Now, I do have a question to ask you. I know that we have this for the rundown specifically in segment 2, but I want to ask the question. Now we'll wait till segment 2 for it. But how confident are you feeling now with this team going forward with a chance that, I mean, playoffs are still there. But there are a couple other teams that are performing a little bit better, even than Nashville. What are you thinking still?
It's the minimum of what they had to do to still be able to talk about playoffs realistically. Uh, I think like if you're wanting to make the playoffs, you have to get 7 points over those 3 matches. They got 7 points over those 3 matches. They have done the absolute what they have to do to stay in contention going into the last few matches. There are very winnable games. I don't know that Nashville's going to catch Philly, but they've played it. Toronto has played into that group a little bit. And, they have to keep pace with everyone around them as well. I mean, for all of the talk about like promotion and relegation and US soccer and all this stuff, what is set up essentially is the last month of MLS season with 5 teams playing for 2 spots. And that is a pretty compelling story week to week that we're going to be watching. I mean, we were joking during the game on Saturday, like first goal goes in, Nashville's in the playoffs, then they give up a goal. Nashville's out of the playoffs, and the goal goes in. Nashville's back in the playoffs. Like that's going to be probably or hopefully every game, every match day going forward for the rest of the season is sort of that punch counter punch that we're going to be seeing from all over the league.
yeah.
So
Not only was it 5 teams now fighting for 2. I mean, for the last 3 weeks or a month, it's been 7 teams fighting for 1 spot, really, because Toronto wasn't really dropping, and then so I agree with you. I mean, I think right now this is a lot more exciting than say the Supporters Shield run because that's been decided, even though mathematically it's still not decided, but it is decided for all intents and purposes. And for Nashville, I think Matt Doyle talked about this in his armchair analyst article, and he's mentioned it before. I think more important than the results, which is crazy that we're even mentioning something that's more important than the result. But I think it's important to mention, like, more important than the result was Hani Mukhtar, Sam Surridge being DPs again and being able to be to be star players and being able to be good players impacting the field. And not just those two, when you look at the entire Nashville squad, it's getting something coherent from this BJ Callahan era. Before this week, there was very little to hang on to from the BJ Callahan era. And that was like a couple build-up plays and I think 1 goal. That was that before this week. Now, think about a week goes by. Those 3 games happen. You're looking at an away game win You're looking at two really good home results, one of which is against Cincinnati, and a bunch of goals, the 5 goals in those 3 games, and only conceding twice to the one of the best teams in the East. Other than that, I mean, the entire conversation is different now. Just 3 games in.
I do think it so if you I mean we've come back to this topic repeatedly on this show talking about like what does Nashville 2.0 look like. And I think all of us have kind of been bullish on not seeing some huge amount of turnover because of the pieces that are here, the big pieces that are pieces that you can win with. But we haven't really seen it up until the last week or so, or last couple weeks. We haven't really seen that play out necessarily. Like we haven't seen it look like maybe these pieces don't quite fit together the way that you would think. But now having come out of the last 2 weeks, I think most people would look at the team and say, okay, this is a team that needs improvement, but a team that has pieces and a team that can move into a next phase. And I think, along with talking about Honey and Surge playing together, that goes hand in hand with, okay, let's reframe the Nashville conversation, not blow it all up and start over again, which some people had advocated. It's the pieces are here. Let's utilize them in a different way and be more effective and move forward with them. And I think that the last couple of weeks shows that you can do that. And that is a success. That is a potential formula for success.
Well, and we'll talk about Hani and Sam definitely more in the second segment, just because I think they do have a lot of impact in the past, week or so. And Valera, I do agree with you. Everything has changed literally this week, and it is wild. And Nashville doesn't necessarily have a terrible schedule going forward. I think the only thing that you do look at is that we only have one home match in the next 4 that is going to be, something to think about is how well Nashville does play away from home, where the other teams are in that playoff line. But other than we don't have a team that's even in the top 7. The toughest team that we do face on our schedule is New York City. So these are winnable games for Nashville. And I believe, Valaire, we normally do it every week, but it's been a little bit since we've had any sort of excitement so we were so excited this week. We actually did a Monday poll this week. Did we not?
Yes, we did. By we, I mean it's me. And when I don't do it, nobody else does it. So, don't say we normally do it every week. It's either I do it or you guys don't do it. Okay. Let's give credit where credit is due to me. Okay. Now that's taken shape in this podcast, I asked our listeners, or actually anybody on Twitter, I guess, whether or not Nashville will make the postseason, or whether or not they think Nashville will make the postseason. And I gotta say, this is the most even poll I've ever laid eyes on in my life. I mean, for about 2 hours after I posted it, people were voting and it was still at 50-50. Now it's slightly moved. It's 48.4% yes and 51.6% no. That's how close it is. And I think, honestly, this poll is indicative of what's going on in MLS right now, especially in the Eastern Conference, in that bubble that Clay was talking about earlier. It's a freaking coin flip at this point. It could be anybody, and it could be, it's such an open field, and all the teams are somehow all playing against each other, and all of them are taking points from each other. And these last 4 games are going to be such a big decider. But if anybody comes at me and say they know exactly what's going to happen, or they have this is exactly what's going to happen, I'll call them a liar, just because simply it is so hard to predict something like that. You can make an educated guess, and I did that even yesterday on Twitter, but I don't think anyone knows for sure what's going to happen. Can DC all of a sudden, DC, by the way, who have an 18 goal scorer, the Golden Boot leader currently on their roster, lost to Philadelphia yesterday 4-0. Can they turn up and beat Nashville at home, or will they lose to Nashville 4-0 at home? I don't know. Both of those results can happen at this point. So I don't know. Moral story is we just have to wait and see. We got to wait for these games to play out to know.
Yeah, Valaire, thank you so much for all the work that you do. That Twitter poll, man, whew, that's got a lot of effort on your end for sure. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna actually talk about these matches because we actually have fun soccer to talk about, and we're gonna do that next right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And as always, you can check us out on Patreon. We know the end of the season is coming up, but we would love for you to be able to join the Patreon. It's only $5 a month. It helps us continue to do the show because we even continue to do the show in the off season, postseason. We do it all year long. Would love to have you around as a Patreon member. Only $5 a month, like I said, at Pharma Soccer. You can also check out our website, pharmasoccer.com. We do shout outs on our, if you do join the Patreon, we do a shout out for you on the show, as well as a 5-star review. So if you want to leave a review as well, you can do that. But we have two matches to talk about. Of course, midweek match against Chicago, where we did get a 1-0 win. And then, of course, against Cincinnati over the weekend, where we did get a draw 2-2. I think it's wild to start off with the Cincinnati match just because the dichotomy between Wednesday and Saturday. I don't actually think it matters which one we start with, but I do think we should start with Cincinnati just because I do think that was the more exciting kind of match for Nashville, getting that 2-2 draw against Cincinnati. Of course, Sam Surridge in the back of the net twice, and then Acosta and the other guy who scored the free kick.
Oriciano.
That one scored the second goal for Cincinnati. That was a wild match in multiple ways. I think first of all, starting lineup wise, if there was a bingo card of would you see Julian Gaines and Taylor Washington starting for Nashville SC together in a competitive match, I don't think I ever, even with how I predict matches and stuff on this podcast, I don't think I even could have done that wild of a prediction, but it happened and it didn't look terrible.
No, it wasn't terrible at all. Matter of fact, it looked good. It looked organized. I think the biggest surprise came with the back three, because we just haven't seen BJ Callahan play with anything other than a back four since he came over to Nashville. So the switch to a back three, while it made sense, because you look at how Cincinnati lines up and they line up with a back three, and it's something Gary Smith always used, well, not always, but mostly did, was to match the opponent's formation. So as soon as we saw the lineup, that was a big surprise. And then you see that Shaq Moore and Dan Lovitz both on the bench rather than starting. And, Taylor Washington wasn't even on the bench for 2 games beforehand. He was even on the bench for Atlanta away or Chicago at home. So then when you look at that and he jumps from that to straight up the starting lineup, or Julian Gaines, who's played a few minutes in CCL for the Mocha game at home, and other than that has gotten his minutes for Huntsville, coming in and playing like he did. I think it's BJ Callahan made a point to kind of praise those two and everybody else who stepped up, because at the end of the day, that's what we've been asking Nashville to do, is to have a better depth, right? When the first guy goes out, you want to make sure that whoever's behind them can take over, can help, and that's what happened on Saturday.
I just want to clarify. Dan Lovitz did start. He started at right center or left center back. Yeah. Which he has struggled in that spot at times over the years, but I think he actually had a really good game. I do think that, I mentioned it on Twitter, but like Taylor Washington is a guy who's grown less and less a part of the squad over the last month. Really, he hasn't played a ton. So to be relied on as an older player in the side to come in and start, and not only start, but possibly have his best half that he's ever had with an SC in that first half, and have a good game overall. I was really, really excited about that. Obviously, this is a very pro Taylor Washington pod. We all quite like him, but he's a little bit lucky to get the first assist, a little bit unlucky to not get a second assist. And he had a great ball over the top late in the half as well. So defensively, there's a lot to like, even with a bit of a makeshift back five, back three, as it were. The thing that I really wanted to like draw attention to was it felt like, and I haven't felt this way about a Nashville team in a while, and it's kind of hard to put this into like numbers and stats and things like that. But like I used to joke that when Gary Smith's teams would give up an early goal, I felt like Nashville was more likely to score than if they didn't give up a goal because they respond and they come back right back into it and get right back to work. And that's something that we saw in this game specifically that we haven't seen necessarily this season from NSC. Obviously, they get the early goal. Okay. Cincinnati scores, and then Nashville scores right after that, like right back to work. They had plenty of chances in that first half, a little bit unlucky to maybe not get a third. To be fair, FC Cincinnati had one where they hit the post. Like they had their fair share of chances. I think that their second goal shouldn't have been a foul, much less a free kick. So like I was a little bit annoyed that that ended up being a goal, but I think that on the whole it was a pretty fair result with Nashville playing a back five that I would not have guessed would come away with any result and getting a result against one of the best teams in the league the last 2 years.
Yeah, and important to know, Jack Mayer was out due to an injury, and so was Jacob Schaffelberg. So his wife did give birth, Jacob Schaffelberg, recently, but he's now out due to an injury, not because of that.
And I don't want this to go by without mentioning it, but we've already talked about it ad nauseum, so we don't need to like kind of focus on it. Patrick Yazbek was back in the team. He came back against Chicago earlier in the week, and then he started this game. There's been no follow-up for the incident, really, other than what we've heard from other news sources. I find that really unfortunate. But that being said, the team is moving forward. He played all right. I wouldn't say he stood out as much as he had in his first appearance with Nashville, for negative and for worse. But I will tell you this, there's been a lot to like out of what we've seen from Perez in these two matches, that has me extremely excited. You know, I think that the odds are that Schaffelberg is probably with Nashville next year, and I think the odds are that Nashville's going to buy Perez and he's going to permanently move to Nashville. But like, if Schaffelberg does move on, having seen what little that we have seen from him, I'm very, very excited about seeing him put a few more things together and maybe not blowing wide open free header at the back post. But other than that, like he had a really good game against Chicago, and he had a couple of really nice moments in this game as well.
Yeah, and it seems like he handles the pressure extremely well for just being a young player that's being put in a position where he came on loan from LA Galaxy because we needed help, and he's come into a position where he's been showing that he should be competing for a starting spot on this team, and I have to assume he probably wants to consider that, moving forward as well. I I think it kind of gets brought up with the way that Hani and Sam Surge have been playing. It seems like there is good soccer that is happening at Geodis Parker. It seems like we are seeing some good soccer. I mean, 7 points and nine. That's good. Question for the both of you: is it good, or have we been witnessing bad soccer for so long this season, where it is an overcorrection for us that it seems like it's back?
As the English like to say often, it's a bit of both. Um, I think this level of soccer, especially in attack, let's focus on that, is good. And I think it has also improved from, 1 goal in 7 games or whatever it was to 5 goals in 3 games. That in itself is a huge improvement, and that in itself is good. I do think, however, that I don't think BJ Callahan has the tools or the players that he wants for his ideal style of play. I think he's making do with what he has. And I think some of the players have really stepped up. and I will mention Brian Anunga as one of those players who has started every single match, I think, or almost every single match under BJ Callahan. And he hasn't been without fault. I don't want to give him any sort of a pass. However, he is doing exactly what the coach is asking him to do, and he has personally, I think, improved his game as well. You see him playing forward. You see him way more comfortable on the ball, and you see him involved in the build-up play, which in the past Nashville SC would just skip him in the build-up play to go to the next guy next to him or away from him, to where now he's not only winning those battles, he is also providing something going forward. Now, that's just one example of how things are better. Now, let's say we take Brian Anunga's position and put in another midfielder who plays similar position, who is competing with Brian Anunga or is an elite midfielder. And then that system starts becoming something else, right? And that's really what needs to happen throughout the pitch. There needs to be more competition and there needs to be more options that are suitable to BJ Callahan's system. And when you start seeing that all across the pitch, then this team will get even better, or ideally would get even better. However, what we have right now, what we're seeing right now from this team is a huge improvement. And I think isolated from the huge improvement, it is good.
I think one of the things that, I mean, look, in MLS, your bread is buttered by how well your DPs play. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, if you're going to be a good team, your DPs have to play well. If you're not going to be a good team, you're going to be over reliant on the ups and downs of your DPs. And one of the things that sticks out to me most over this stretch of games where Nashville's been playing well, which does predate this unbeaten streak that they're on at the moment, is that Honey's obviously not exactly at MVP level, but Honey's been playing well. And I think that this is the first extended stretch in the history of this club in MLS where a player has been playing better than Honey. I don't think that we've seen that. I mean, and that is what Sam Surridge has been over the last 3 or 4 weeks. He has been playing better than Honey. And that's not a knock against Honey, who I think has been playing well, but that is a sign that maybe we are getting to the point where we can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel for this team performing well. Because now they have 2 DPs who are playing their role, who are scoring goals, who are setting up goals, who are putting in defensive shifts, from the front of the attack, who are doing every little thing that's asked of them, in addition to the big, game-changing thing that's asked of them. And that is the sign of things starting to turn the corner. Will that be good enough to get to the playoffs? I don't know. We're going to talk about that in the third segment, but I do think that in and of itself, even remove the sort of role players that are stepping up and playing well, like Taylor or Anunga or whoever, putting that aside, these two getting on the same page and playing at a high level at the same time is something that will win you games in MLS always. You will always win games if your DPs are performing well and together.
And I'll get back to Sam Surridge really quickly, but I do think there's a big piece of this that also the squad getting healthier is a big piece of this. When you're missing Walker Zimmerman, whether it was for international break or injury, you're missing Anibal Godoy for international break or injury, those are key pieces in your team. And especially to your point, Clay, Walker Zimmerman, a DP defender of the year, 3 years in MLS. When you're missing that piece, I don't care who you are, you're gonna feel that. That's just how it is. And then when you add to it that a team has been performing bad or has been bad, and they are missing that piece, then it only gets worse. Going back to Sam Surridge, though, Sam Surridge now hit 11 goals in MLS, and I think we really need to highlight that. Only one other player other than Hani Mukhtar has came anywhere near this, and it was TJ Sapong scoring 12 goals. So one more goal, and Sam Surridge will tie the best outcome of any player in MLS for Nashville SC, not named Hani Mukhtar. And there was one season in USL where Daniel Rio scored 20 goals. And those are the only names who have scored double digits in league play for Nashville SC. And when you look at what Sam Surridge is doing outside of that, He had an assist against Atlanta. He's playing on the left, on the right. He jumps in the middle. And I think the most impressive thing has been his defensive work. We all know he has a finishing touch. We all know he's tall. We know he can head the ball. And lately, we've learned that he can link up the play and play the pass. However, what I'm seeing from him is him tracking back on that left flank against Cincinnati, like he's a left wing back all of a sudden, or he's a left back at times. And him, the amount of effort that's going into what Sam Surge does, I don't know how fit this guy is. He might be Alex Muyl level fit at this point. It's crazy how much effort he's putting on and still being able to run and still being able to play pretty much 90 minutes, 3 times a week.
Well, and we'll just touch on it because I think he was also the main highlight of Wednesday against Chicago, getting the goal against Chicago for us to beat Chicago 1-0. A game that was completely different in outlook, formation, everything in comparison to what that Cincinnati match was, where Nashville did go up early. And I thought BJ Callahan turned into Gary Smith for a second in that second half when it came to just playing behind the ball and completely just giving possession and holding on defense wise. I think it shows specifically how BJ can coach and how there can be two different styles based on different opponents, different lineups, even when the team is tired. I think I'm not necessarily sure if it's BJ experimenting or if he's playing to the competition that he is playing against, but it does seem to be working for this squad.
So when BJ first came to Nashville, they had a little thing where he kind of explained his style, I guess, or his philosophy to the media a little bit, and we spent a good amount of time with him. And one thing he kept going back to is that there are these pillars, these things that they do as a team. That's regardless of what's going on, regardless of the formation, regardless of the style, the system, whatever you want to call it, positions, all of that. There are pillars of play that they stick by. And he told us to not worry much about what formation that's going to be. When you see Nashville SC play, you'll know that Nashville SC is playing. That was kind of his, and I think that's an ideal thing. I don't think Nashville SC is there again. I think it'll take a minute to get there. But I think this week was very much an example of that. You go to Atlanta, you play this expansive soccer, you have a lot of the ball, you create a whole lot of chances, and you win that way. Check. You come back home to Chicago, a Chicago team that's struggling. You realize that, hey, maybe these players are tired. You have a Cincinnati game coming up. You sit back, you defend, you pick your moments, you go in transition, you get a goal, win against Chicago. That's enough. Move on next to Cincinnati game, which was a lot more back and forth. Now, Cincinnati, similar to Chicago, I guess, did put a lot of pressure on Nashville's defense. They just have more quality than Chicago. But it's a completely different way of playing because you have 3 center backs and because you have those wing backs now and new players, no personnel. So to me, those 3 games are 3 completely different setups, 3 completely different ways of looking at the game. But the 2 consistent things is that obviously Nashville got a result out of all 3 of them. And the second thing is that the players knew exactly what to do. Now, some of them didn't do it very well, don't get me wrong, but the instruction was there. There was no confusion. It was very clear instructions. And I think everybody on that pitch knew exactly what to do at all times, or what is the right thing to do, I guess, at all times, even if they didn't do it.
Clay,
Yup.
Well, that's fantastic. I do also want to make sure, I know we gave credit at the beginning of this to Taylor Washington and Julian Gaines for that match against Cincinnati. Just want to give them credit again. I think it's an extremely tough situation to come in. I think we talked about Taylor Washington, of course, a decent amount being pro Taylor Washington. But Julian Gaines is an extremely young player that had to come into a position and start. And I thought he actually played extremely well against Cincinnati, as well as anybody could expect for somebody to be put in that position. I think he is an exciting prospect when it comes to this team in the future.
And he had the unique experience of playing against 2 different players because Cincinnati switched it. So he had Luciano Costa or Ishiano, who's one of the best wingbacks in MLS, going at him in two different halves. And I thought for the most part, he held his own really well.
And I mean, two guys on the polar opposites of, their soccer careers probably. Gaines is a guy that people have been excited about, all year getting started. And Taylor, I mean, who knows how many starts he has left for NSC. I mean, his contract does run for one more year, so that is worth and keep in mind. But he is a 31-year-old. He hasn't played a ton since the coaching change, and so him getting a start, coming in, getting an assist, playing well, like that's good for him, personally and professionally. But he's the last link from the USL team. He's the last link from the first professional season, and I think that it's special when he touches the field every time, specifically because of that. Because once he's done, which will happen, and probably sooner rather than later in the next few years, um, that is a piece of club history and culture really that goes away. So him getting in and having a good game, I think, is really important and a really good reminder of where this club was and hopefully where it can go.
And we talked about a little bit in the first segment how just some of the other matches and teams do line up for Nashville when it comes to playoffs. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in depth. And we actually do have some breaking news as well. And we're going to talk about that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. As mentioned, we also have a Patreon. Please go check that out at Pharma Soccer. Also, pharmasoccer.com. We would love to have you check that out. As I mentioned in the second segment, we actually do have breaking news that I do want to bring up and mention first here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. I know it was brought up in multiple locations. Ladies and gentlemen, Randall Leal has played a competitive game of soccer. I repeat, Randall Leal has came in and played minutes of soccer.
Really, that's like not breaking news because he didn't break. So Randall Leal has played soccer and didn't break, so it is not breaking news.
Okay.
Hey, maybe we'll see him. There's less of a need for that kind of player with the way Perez has been playing, but maybe we'll see him towards the end of the season. We'll see what happens.
Oh God, that was great. Okay, well, let's just move on from that. Look, there were some interesting matches in MLS this weekend and this week as well. Some benefiting Nashville SC, some hurting. I think Philadelphia Union trying to realizing that they're actually really good is not beneficial for Nashville, but DC and Toronto realizing that they're actually bad is good for Nashville SC. I don't know. Any other matches stick out to you over the weekend before we kind of talk about the teams that we have to worry about in playoffs?
I think the LA Galaxy, and we don't talk about the Western Conference a whole lot, but if we're talking about MLS, I think the LA Galaxy and the Portland Timbers are the most fun teams to watch in the world of any sport. They are full on excitement. They score 1,000,000 goals. They let in 1,000,000 goals. I don't know how any of these teams have gone results. I would think all the games end in draws just based on how things are going. Portland Timbers managed by none other than Phil Neville, pure entertainment. Evander, sure. Evander has the most goal contributions in MLS with like something ridiculous, like 38 goal contributions, more than Messi, more than Cucho, more than Lucho, more than Chicho. Like Evander and two other Portland players have over 10 goals. There are 4 different LA Galaxy players with over 10 goals. Like it's ridiculous. It's really fun. If you get a chance to watch a Western Conference game, watch one of those two teams. They're going to entertain you, whether by scoring or by conceding. You're going to be entertained regardless.
All right, don't look it up, Valer. Who has more goals? Is it LA Galaxy or is it Portland?
I think Portland. I think Portland has the most goals. No.
They are tied actually with the same amount
Oh,
of goals that they have, and
okay.
they both have scored 63 goals in the league so far in 31 matches played, which is wild.
Yeah.
And also one of them is in first place, and the other one is in eighth place, which also makes
And like Portland has conceded, just to give you an idea, just so we're not, I just looked it up. Portland have conceded 53 goals, which is the fourth worst in the Western Conference. Like that's the level. And then the Galaxy have also conceded like 46 goals, which is not quite as bad, but still pretty bad. So yeah, those two teams would be my pick for some entertainment outside of Nashville SC.
Um, Evander has 18 assists, and I just wanted to point this out because it's still insane. The career record or the single season record for assists in MLS, he's probably still not catching because it's wild. Do you
I thought
either
it
of
was
you?
20.
No.
It's not
MLS does
20.
hockey assists, so no.
Okay. Maybe I was reading something else. Maybe I was reading just primary assists.
So it is 26. It was Carlos Valderrama in the early days. Early days. Carlos, I think 97 maybe. So or no, I guess it would have been like 2000. But anyway, Carlos Valderrama. So shout out to P-Bay.
And as Valer said, if those are probably the two teams to watch in the West because they are a lot of fun and exciting. But if not, you should be watching this race in the East. That does include Nashville SC when it comes to getting into the playoffs because it is kind of nuts. I want Clay to go into the schedule here in a second, but I do want to tell you just kind of everything that is going on. So at the bottom is New England at 28 points, Chicago at 29. I do think that they're probably out of it. They're still mathematically in, but it kind of seems like they're out of it. Then 13th, 12th, and 11th place with 33 points. That'd be DC, Nashville, and Atlanta United. Um, I, it's weird. It's like we literally have the exact same record of 8 wins, 9 draws, and 13 losses with the three of them. It's just goal differential that separates that. Montreal's in 10th and 30 with 34 points, and then getting into those playoff positions, ninth and eighth. That would be Toronto in eighth and Philadelphia in ninth with 36 points. So, and we have a game in hand over Toronto.
Everyone has a game in hand over Toronto.
That's
They
That
right.
don't play on decision day. That's the
yeah.
biggest difference. Everybody else plays on decision day.
So it's interesting because I was thinking about this earlier in the show when we were talking about it, and we kind of like, well, Philly might, they're a good team. They might stick in there. But Toronto is the one that feels the most vulnerable. And I went and looked at who every team is playing, and I absolutely do not see Toronto making the playoffs. So they have 3 games left. They're at Chicago, winnable. And then they're playing the New York Red Bulls and Inter Miami to end the season. So good luck to the Toronto FC. Philly though has a pretty tough run in as well. So they have 4 matches. They're home to Atlanta, then at Orlando, at Columbus, and then home to Cincinnati. So they're going to have to pull a result there, a pretty big result in one of those big games, in order to really be up there because Montreal goes San Jose at home, at Atlanta, at Charlotte, New York City FC. Atlanta is at Philly, Montreal, Red Bull New York, and at Orlando on decision day. Nashville, I think Nashville probably has one of the easier run-ins. They're at New England, home to DC, at New York City FC, and then at Chicago on the last day of the season. And then DC is Columbus at NSC, at New England, and Charlotte. So DC's run-in is also a pretty decent one as well. So that DC Nashville game coming up is going to be a pretty big one, probably in the playoff race. But for all that talk about Philly earlier, I feel significantly less confident after looking at their run-ins compared to everyone else. They're a better team, I think, than everyone down there, but none of these teams are actually good. They're all down here for a reason. So I just think I think looking at it, you have to rate Nashville's chances pretty well, but Nashville's going to have to pull out results that they were not pulling out, before the last 2 weeks, and that's the part that should be worrying, if you're a Nashville fan.
And the only team that I would say might have easier or as easy of a schedule is Montreal, but I do firmly believe that Nashville has, I wouldn't say easiest, but the best, more favorable schedule off of all of these players, all these teams that Clay just listed. When you look at playing Chicago, which they just beat at home, away from home, which Chicago's record, I mean, at home is a little bit better, but like they still lost 7 games at home. Like they are not some sort of juggernaut. Like
The last game of the
DC,
season, they're not playing for anything.
right.
Well, and
DC at home have lost 7 games as well.
yeah.
Um,
And I think for Chicago, it could be dependent on if they are playing for anything or not. They are technically not out of the playoff race yet. If they do win a couple matches, they're in this, and that's the weird thing about this. Any team that wins one or two matches in this next four is in the
yeah,
hunt.
yeah, and that's the thing with even New England, where they're playing terribly. They have 2 games in hand over Chicago, and 1 game in hand over a lot of these other teams. So like, yeah, I mean, you're right, Steven. I don't think Chicago or New England are gonna make a push for it. I don't know. Maybe they will. Like, I can't tell you for sure.
New
I can
England
give
gets
you
a
a
good
pretty good
result
guess.
against Nashville, coming up over the weekend. Like they're right there, they're still right there
Yeah.
with us in some way, shape, or form. It's wild.
So it's exciting. It's exciting, and I think it's gonna keep the season kind of these last couple of weeks of the season really exciting for everybody watching. I do think like for Nashville SC, it's gonna be almost more important to continue playing well and continue doing these things well instead of just making the ninth seed. I don't think making the ninth seed is a big testament of what BJ Callahan has built necessarily, but it will be a big boost for the players. And I think there's massive important stuff, whether it's marketing or just on the pitch. It's more games and it's better to make the playoffs always than not to make it. Don't get me wrong. But I think the most important thing out of these last 4 games for Nashville SC is to play well, more so than making the playoffs.
Well, and this goes back to, the conversations about, putting the coach coaching search on hold for as long as they did. And that is all you have to do in MLS is make the playoffs. After you get that far, genuinely, I mean, it's a cliche, but genuinely anything can happen.
right.
Like it is, this is a Nashville team that has been terrible for most of the year, but took 4 points off of FC Cincinnati this season. Like you, things happen in the playoffs that are unexplainable and that can't happen. And the thing that Nashville has going for it that all these other teams that don't have, except barring Philly, maybe, is that you can look at Nashville's roster and see a team that has won games in the playoffs and where spending is about a win now kind of roster. So if you can get Nashville into the playoffs, which is a big ask and it's not a guarantee, and I'm not saying they're going to make some MLS Cup run from the 9 or 8 seed, but what I am saying is that this is the team that is not an 8 or 9 seed team on paper. And if you get both TPs firing, you get a couple people back healthy playing like Walker Zimmerman. Mayer was looking pretty good before he got hurt. Like these guys all coming back into the fold under a new coach playing well. Anything can happen at that point. Like, Nashville's payroll is fourth highest in the league, and that's been a mark against them. But you get into the playoffs, it's not a mark against them because, it's a new season at that point.
And it all starts this weekend coming up against New England. Again, as we talked about, New England is currently on the bottom of the table. They had like a weird renaissance of playing okay, and now they're back to being bad where they should be, which I do appreciate. Oh, also, if anybody was worried, still, San Jose lost again. So we definitely do not have to worry about the wooden spoon at all. But we do play New England coming up in New England, which is always a extremely weird place to play. I think for players, I think it's a weird place to play at the end of the year as well, with all tiredness, fatigue, playing on a pitch like New England does offer. Always something to think about. But can Nashville continue it? That's the question.
Speaking of teams who've lost 7 games at home, New England have also lost 7 games at home this season. It seems like a common thread. Nashville have lost 5 at home, by the way. I had to look that up as well because that's not great either. It's just perhaps better. But for New England, it's been dreadful since that Leagues Cup. I wouldn't call it a run, but they made the next round of the Leagues Cup over Nashville SC, and they ended up going to New York and losing on penalties. Exited the Leagues Cup, immediately beat Montreal 5-0 after that. Away from home, beat Montreal 5-0, and then haven't won in 5 tries since then. It's been 2 draws and 3 losses. Their last game was against Charlotte away from home, where 2 of their players started fighting each other at halftime and have to be physically pulled away from each other before they actually laid hands on each other. So that's the situation in New England. Caleb Porter is fighting with reporters and referees and his players and anybody who would ever listen to him or be around him. So he's an interesting character for sure. Yeah, and Charlotte FC kind of used this game to rebound, or I guess revitalize their season. So it seems like a common thread. But yeah, this is not a good New England team. It's not a good team, and they are really struggling for any sort of relevancy and any sort of hope. The one thing is they play at Gillette Stadium. So, Steven, you are right. It is a weird situation because it's not a really good soccer stadium. And we've seen in the past where players either play fewer minutes or don't play at all, or play badly or get injured on those stadiums. So I think that will be the one advantage I will give New England. And the last bit is Carlos Hill. Of course, he former MVP, really good player, quality shows at the end. And every now and again, you'll see him do something where it's like, okay, this guy still got it.
Weird match day experience at Gillette. I was there for a scoreless draw a few years ago, as you guys may remember. But the weird thing about New England is not only that they're just not winning in this 5-game winless streak, they're getting boat raced in a few of these games as well. And they've given up 13 goals over those 5 games. They've scored 4 times, but it's not been a murderer's row. It's been Real Salt Lake, St. Louis, Orlando, Charlotte, and Montreal. Like, those are not teams that you should be getting outscored by 9 goals over 5 games. And so really worrying signs there. And, you know, maybe, we're talking about earlier about Taylor Washington, the old guard, things like that. Maybe Nashville can finally just go to New England, get a win, and then they can just go ahead and send every screenshot they have of it to Charlie Davies to settle scores from like 3 years ago.
Well, let's see if let's predict if we settle those scores or not. Clay, you were doing it. Let's do it.
Well, you can follow me at Clay Russell on Instagram and Twitter. You can also check out Nashville Soccer Archive. You may hear a little bit more about National Soccer Archive later this week, so keep an eye on the social media streets about that.
Exciting.
Also with that, you can settle in on Saturday and watch an exhilarating 1-0 win in New England with the 1 goal scored by Brian Anunga. When I went to New England, Brian Anunga's brother and I think one of his buddies tried to get me to rent out his Airbnb. And so because of that, I'm going to say Brian Anunga wins 1-0.
Just to give you an idea of how terrible New England has been in terms of defense, they are averaging 2.06 goals against per match in MLS. And that is a whole lot of goals. Nashville SC have just found their scoring feat. So I am going to predict an Nashville SC win, which I got the results correct. I got the win against Chicago and the draw against Cincinnati. So pat on the back there for me. And then I will assume that Nashville SC will score more than one. So we'll go with, let's do 2 goals and let's do New England scores once. So 2-1 Nashville SC win away from home. I think it'll be a big deal. And I think you're looking at Sam Surridge to continue his goal scoring form. So he'll score once. And I think Hani Mukhtar will score a penalty that is kind of really controversial and gets a New England player red card. That's, I mean, how many more details do you want from this? I'm giving you the game plan right here.
I don't think anybody actually asked for it as you yell at the people telling them that what more do you want from me? But that's fine. That is what it is.
I don't know. Anyway, follow me at Valer Shabilla on all socials. But most importantly, we have the foot golf tournament with Kicking It 615. So make sure to sign up for that. Go to Kicking It 615 at Kicking It 615 on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also ki615.org. All the details are there. Check out our foot golf tournament. It's a great fundraiser. This is the 5th year in a row that we're doing it, which is insane. We're looking for sponsors, we're looking for players, we're looking for people to help out. So please check that out.
And that's actually what I will plug for my stuff as well. Seriously, the foot golf tournament is so much fun. It raised a great amount of money for Kicking It 615. So if there's any way that you can contribute in the way that Valer said, please do so. It is an amazing time. Go check that out. As I have made my ridiculous predictions, Nashville has gotten 7 points in 9. So I don't see why I should stop, particularly because it's working. And I'm going to continue it. It's going to be a 4-4 draw against New England in New England. 2 goals from Sam Surridge, 1 from Patrick Yazbek, and then Shaq Moore is going to score a goal as well. Thank you again so much for listening to the show. We appreciate it. I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about next week, so we will absolutely be back next week to talk about this New England match, more about the playoffs. Yeah, excited to have talk to y'all, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a good rest of your week.